Well, Tim once again talks about raising taxes, and I think it is very wrong to be using the 200,000 men and women in Virginia whose jobs are threatened by the sequestration deal that I opposed and Tim has said in debates is the right thing to do. They should never be used as a political bargaining chip to raise taxes on job-creating small businesses. President Obama actually said in 2009 that raising taxes in a weak economy is a bad idea. Well, the growth in our economy and the GDP is actually worse now than it was in 2009. So raising taxes in this fragile economy will only be more harmful. In a recent debate, Tim said everyone ought to be paying, or he'd consider everyone paying more taxes, which is consistent with him trying to raise state taxes on people earning as little as $17,000 a year. And you just wonder, Tim, do you realize folks out there are hurting? How difficult it is? People cannot afford any more taxes. People are paying $30 or more every time they fill up with gasoline compared to January of 2009. And so you start blasting oil companies, and guess what? Who will ultimately pay the price if you increase taxes on oil companies? It'll go on to consumers. I remember talking to a mother in the Shenandoah Valley at a filling station who could only afford $20 of gas, and I asked her if you could fill up and get it all, it would be costing you $37 more. What would you do with it? And she said, well, I could provide for my family. These are real people in the real world that are being hurt by your counterproductive, punishing energy policies.
Governor.
And the last thing we need is more taxes on working families.
George, you just started your answer by saying that I'm trying to hold the military hostage to raise taxes.
No, I said the 200,000.
You and I are both fathers, and this one is very personal to me.
I talked about the men and women working.
Let's let him answer.
I have a son who has just started a career in the military. I'm not going to do things that will hurt the troops or hurt defense. I'm not going to do things that will hurt veterans. When I was governor, having to shrink the state budget, our veterans services budget doubled because we had work to do to make sure veterans were protected. I was Commander-in-Chief of the Virginia Guard during 2 wars, and I went to Iraq and Afghanistan to see our Guardsmen and women, and I went to homecomings, and I went to deployments, and I went to funerals, and I went to wakes. I'm not going to do anything that will hurt defense. Defense industry jobs. I recruited defense contractors like Northrop Grumman to move to Virginia. That's why I've put a plan on the table that I just laid out, very specific, a compromise that will avoid defense cuts, and your only plan is to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would increase the deficit and then require more cuts.
This next question, Senator, goes to you. In your last debate, and you've said it here as well, repeatedly, that we ought to repeal and replace, in your words, Obamacare. Yet in the same answers, you have said in the last debate that one of the most popular provisions in this law should be kept, including allowing kids to stay on their parents' health insurance until they're 26 and provisions for pre-existing conditions. And while those are certainly popular, they have to be paid for in some way, and that's how we got the individual mandate and getting more people on the rolls with health insurance. So specifically, how would you keep the popular provisions of the health care reform law if you repealed the rest of the law?
Let me just finish up on what Tim said on the previous, and I'll get to this, because it's very important. I was talking about holding hostage the men and women, 200,000.
But we're not talking about hostages, George.
I didn't use the word hostage.
You did use the word hostage.
Let's let Senator
political bargaining chips.
Hostages. We're not talking about hostages. We're talking about American military.